On behalf of the Work Better Now team, I'd like to welcome everybody to Working Better Now, a series on workbetternow.com that features a Q&A with a successful business leader. And today, I'm really thrilled to be joined by Nick Herinckx, president of Bluefield. And Nick, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Happy to be here.
Yeah, Nick and I have connected recently, despite being on the opposite coast. I'm here in New York, and Nick is in the Portland area, and we've really hit it off. And Nick's an amazing entrepreneur. We're going to hear a little bit about his story, and I'm excited that he'll be able to tell it to you. So let's jump in a little bit, Nick. Tell us about your business.
Yeah, so I'm the president of Bluefield, which I founded in 2017. And what I really like to focus on is helping entrepreneurs scale their business, usually helping them take their business through scaling pains with different kind of coaching and advising and investing services, really with the end goal of helping entrepreneurs find the success they want, but without sacrificing personal fulfillment along the way.
Gotcha. And you said, I think you said scaling pains.
Yeah.
Did I get that right? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. And so, you know it when you're in it. Usually every business starts off somewhere in survival mode when we're all founding. And the point of survival mode is just to get out of survival mode. And so we usually focus a lot in that stage on product market fit and sales. So actually, those are pretty much the only two things that matter at that stage. And that stage can take a while. It can take a while to find product market fit. But once you do, I've noticed that a lot of entrepreneurs tend to move into a stage that's maybe exciting or like a fun stage where you finally have some team members, you know that it's working. You can start to delegate some of the things that you don't want to do anymore. That lasts, if you continue to be successful at selling and at sales and at hiring the right team members, usually somewhere around 20 or so team members, you then get kicked out into scaling pains. You don't mean to go into scaling pains. You get kicked out into it because complexity increases in your business. And then those scaling pains, everything starts breaking, process isn't working. You don't know why, usually the first instinct's to blame the people, when actually it's like a process problem and roles and responsibilities and structure. And the growth of the leader needs to grow, the leader needs to grow exponentially in order to properly take a company through scaling pains. And that's usually when there's some major pain, and that's when I come in to help.
Gotcha. Have been there, so I can absolutely relate. Nick, tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to starting Bluefield.
Yeah, so even before Bluefield, I was a CEO. I started and then grew as CEO a business called Obility, which was in the digital marketing space and analytics, specifically for B2B companies. And so that went from me, I had a business partner, and we took that from just our apartments up to over 60 some odd people over the course of about 5 years, and then sold it and had a good exit, and then didn't know what I wanted to do. And of course, that's a really shiny and exciting story to have like a good exit, to not need to work anymore. What that story hides is how difficult that time was scaling that business. And so there was all the stress, there was the workload that those who are founders know well. I was also struggling to keep up with the growth of the business. I was a first-time manager and a first-time leader. So I was trying to learn and grow as my business was. And so ultimately, this culminated in a good exit. I took about a year off. I needed about 6 to 8 months of that just to decompress and find myself again. Now, I'd spent so long working for others, employees, customers, everyone else mattered kind of more than me. And so I got to kind of prioritize myself again. And during that time, I started having other CEOs and entrepreneurs reach out just to talk. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was trying to figure out what my next thing would be, but I just loved these talks. And so I started Bluefield because of these calls that I was having with entrepreneurs that just needed help with different things and perspective, and essentially a place to go for agenda-free peer advice and support. And it just took off from there. So I currently now work with entrepreneurs one-on-one. I work with about 40 CEOs, ranging in about pre-revenue startup to over 300 million in revenue. I also invest as well. I'll angel invest in untapped founders, or usually minority founders who have a hard time getting access to angel funding. And then the third thing I do is through Bluefield is we run a network of CEO peer groups that were essentially built the way I would have appreciated the support. And so we currently have a lot of CEO members, and I bring in other facilitators who are current or past CEOs that are ready to translate their success into fulfillment too.
Gotcha. Thanks for sharing your background. And it's just a logical story. And I find it interesting that you didn't know what you wanted to do, but people were knocking on your doors, and all of a sudden, I guess a light bulb must have gone off and go, wait a minute, maybe there's something here.
Yeah, it starts. So, looking back, it's so tempting to make such like a great story, like it was all planned out. And it is a good story, but when you're in it, you don't know what the story is. And it certainly felt like, I think the one thing that I did well in hindsight was I did a lot better following, I think, my gut or my intuition, and following what made me excited and was fun. And that's led me to where I'm at now. I think in my previous business, it was a lot more about being successful. My personal feelings I pushed to the side.
Gotcha. That's really interesting. I hope everybody takes note of that. Nick, tell us about what your team at Bluefield looks like.
Yeah, and so I've had an assistant for a while, which we talked about. I have an operations manager. Most of the team are contractors who I work with, which are other facilitators, like I mentioned, they have to be current or past CEOs. And I really work with them to help fill and build groups that then they moderate using Bluefield's process. And so
Gotcha.
I think the thing I've done also better this time than I did at Ability was keep the team and the business model a lot more lean, which has worked really well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of businesses going in that direction. It just makes sense, and it's consistent with the whole work from home movement and all of that. You have a small lean team, as you said. You have your assistant, you have your ops manager, and you have these facilitators. What you call you go by the title of president. What do you consider your role as president to be, given the stage of the company right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I view myself as both a visionary role. It's like setting the direction, coming up with the ideas to best serve the clients and make a difference and achieve our mission. But it's a dual role at this stage because I'm also an integrator, which means I get to get my hands dirty again, which I've actually found fun. I was worried I wouldn't find that fun after having not done that for a little bit. It's been fun to go back. And so as both the visionary and the integrator, I get to come up with the vision, and I set aside specific time to be in that mind space and to do that. And then I essentially act as my own kind of manager and execute with my ops manager and the assistant. And I look at essentially what the hourly rate would be to do the activities that I'm doing, and I'm spending my time, and anything that's I basically take the lowest hourly rate stuff and fill up my team's time first, and then I do what's left.
Gotcha. Interesting model. We at WBN, we believe how you do things is just as important as what you do. And you strike me as somebody who's probably very deliberate in terms of how your business functions, from how your facilitators work with their members and how you work with your ops manager. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you think Bluefield does very well?
Yeah, and so I think one of the things that Bluefield does really well is I want to say on the heart side of leadership development. That's something that's important that both I bring into coaching, but that's also very present in our groups. The other thing that, which is a little bit more of my natural tendency, is on the organization and kind of like a execution excellence side. I'm really big on execution excellence and always have been. So we do all the reports, all the data about how the groups are doing and getting feedback. I think those two things are something that's done really well. I think some areas that we could improve on, I'd actually like to be doing more over this next year on getting our clients and members together more. For example, before the pandemic, I tried to kick this off. We took a group of entrepreneurs to the Himalayas for an executive retreat and a new experience. And I'd like to do more of that and do more of that more often. And hopefully that's something that my team can then start to own as we move into the next year, as these groups are growing, and I find myself watching complexity increase again.
Right, right. So as complexity is increasing and you have a lean team, how are you guys leveraging technology to, to stay lean and yet to be really effective?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so we get a lot done for the size of the team that we are, and technology is a really big, important part of that. And so there's the standard things like, email and Slack. Maybe I'll start with the platforms we found to be helpful, because there's platforms and process. A lot of people bring on the platforms without the supporting process, and it's negligible impact. And so the platforms we use are, of course, email, Asana we use for project management, which includes vendors. Slack is something that we use both for clients as well as internally as a team. And then we also use Apollo, is a sales tool that helps facilitate a lot of data tracking and some automation in the sales outreach. One of my favorite tools is a tool called Boomerang, which is a Google Apps for Business plugin, a Gmail plugin. It essentially allows you to return emails back into your inbox if there's no response or at a certain date, as well as schedule emails for later, things like that. So that's a huge productivity hack that helps me not forget things or drop things in email in particular. And then we have our accounting systems and things like that. I should say that's kind of the backbone of the technology we use.
Gotcha. And so you mentioned, making sure that the process is clear before you get the technology or the platform. Do you have a process for establishing the processes?
Yeah. And so you have to go through and use it a few times. Let's even back up before that. You know what I realized? Like, people don't actually watch tutorial videos on how to use the software. They like to just dive in. I find that's a big mistake. Not that they're exciting to watch, but that's where you actually learn how best to use the tools. And so when I'm onboarding a new tool, the first thing I do is immerse myself in how it works. It's either me or a team member that immerses themselves in how it works, and essentially comes back with a mind map of how it would integrate and be additive into how we currently do things. There's also a tendency I see, particularly in companies, for like product creep or tool creep. And so the antidote I've seen to that is actually to invest a lot more time up front. You almost have to become an expert at the tool before you decide to onboard it, so you really understand how you're going to put it in. And so that's really the process, is to become an expert in the tool, then map out how it saves time or fits into existing process, and then onboard it. And this is a step that at my size of teams just unnecessary, but in larger teams, what I found is you actually have to have a process to monitor that the tool and the process is being followed. You roll out a process, you look at it, 8 months later, and then many founders, entrepreneurs get upset that nobody's using it, and we did all this work for nothing, and everybody misses that last piece.
Right. So you mentioned that you have an assistant. How long have you had your assistant?
Let's see. I've had my assistant for, I think, 3.5 years now, about 3.5 years.
Gotcha. And what has having your assistant enabled you to do?
I think having my assistant has enabled me to do a few things. Number one is to focus on the higher level, like I kind of mentioned hourly rates earlier. I get to focus on what's, 80-20 rule, what's most impactful, and the things that I can do that really others can't as well. Especially in my business, there's certain things only I can do. And so number one, I think that's been the biggest payoff. Number two, the assistant helps me look good. So when things get really busy and when things get hectic and it's so easy to lose track of things, I view my assistant as like a second brain in a way, where she's fantastic in actually bringing things back to me and helping me look very proactive to others, even when I might be overloaded or missing things.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. It's interesting you mentioned the hourly rate. We've done an e-guide, and one of the things we talk about it in terms of in terms of part of getting unstuck and getting unleashed in your business is we just did some simple math on what hourly rates are of business owners. Just taking a look at their comp and maybe their, what they're taking in profits. If somebody's making, just say, $200,000 a year, their hourly rate at a minimum is $100 an hour, which means every minute of work, or every hour, let's say, of work that they're doing on lower value tasks, they're paying $100 an hour for that, which is nuts. And I think when you point that out to business owners, they don't necessarily, it's kind of shocking to them. Yeah.
It's funny because I don't even view it necessarily. It's easy to talk in hourly rates, but that can also be deceptive, because I work with plenty of early stage founders who they actually pay themselves less than a lot of the people that they're hiring. And so the way I've tended to look at it, which has actually been really helpful in learning what to delegate to an assistant, is forget about the hourly rate. What's the ROI of the activity? At this stage of the business, what does the CEO or entrepreneur or founder need to be working on to best get to the next stage? And anything else isn't helping you move forward, even though it might be urgent and feel like an emergency.
Right.
And so the more of that stuff, so I tend to look at more of the ROI of the time, or the value, not necessarily, for example, and working with entrepreneurs, it's really easy to get focused a lot on, especially as the team's growing and especially as money's tight, you avoid putting in layers or management layers. So you end up with all these direct reports, and you're spending all this time in one-to-one and looking internally, dealing with this growing team and process, when really what you actually need to be doing more than ever is looking outwards. You need to be continuing relationships with investors. You need to be going and visiting your top customers. You need to be involved in the highest level enterprise or top level sales. And so that's like an example of how it's easy to feel very productive and be doing high hourly rate things. You're still leading and managing the team, but you're actually still not doing the right things if you want to get to the next stage of the business.
Yeah, makes sense. Nick, what do you like to do when you're not working?
Yeah, I love music. I love playing guitar. I played guitar since middle school.
I didn't know that. I'm a guitar player as well. I can't believe that hasn't come up yet.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, me neither. That's so funny. I don't mean to collect guitars, but I have a lot of guitars. And so I love that's my best outlet and best creative. I have so much fun. So I'll do a lot of playing guitar. I have a young family, and so my two girls are 4 and 7. And so that keeps me busy as well, and that and friends. So, that's what I spend my time doing when I'm not working.
Gotcha. Nick, where can people find out more about you and your company?
Yeah, I'm really active on LinkedIn. Go find me on LinkedIn, add me on LinkedIn. That's a good way to keep in touch. My website is bluefieldresults.com if you want to come take a little bit more look at the team and what we're doing.
Terrific. Nick, I really appreciate you spending a few minutes with us today and sharing those really awesome insights. There's a lot of people who work with entrepreneurs out there, but your background is incredible. You had that really successful exit, and then obviously you did something where people were reaching out to you, which of course led to the opportunity. So your insights are really especially appreciated.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
All right, Nick. Thanks.